You know what, Android's an awesome platform and it's growing by the day, but one of the biggest challenges with it so far has been battery life. What's going on, guys? I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and there's one device out there that just came out and it's trying to change your perception of how you view Android battery life. It's a Motorola DROID RAZR MAXX, and this thing is available right now from Verizon Wireless for $300 with a 2-year agreement. Now this thing isn't that different from the original Motorola DROID RAZR. It's packing the same 1.2 gigahertz dual-core TI OMAP processor. It's got the same 4.3-inch display, the same 8-megapixel camera, but where it is different, it's packing a little bit of extra girth and a 3,300 milliamp hour battery right inside of this device. Now Motorola says it can take up to 21.5 hours of talk time before this thing powers down. We're going to take a look at this in the review and see if this really changes the way Android works. You know, maybe a bigger battery will equate to better performance, you know, in terms of longevity. We'll take a look at it in the review, but first, some love to Best Buy Mobile for hooking us up with phones for use in our One Paw Bandit giveaway game. When you walk into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working. They'll help you set up your settings so you get optimal battery life, you'll get text messaging set up, phone calls set up, and more. So when you walk out that door, you're working. Let's take a look at this. Does bigger battery equal a must-have for this device? We'll find out starting right now. You know what, it may look a lot like the original DROID RAZR, but the DROID RAZR MAXX has one thing that's really going for it, and that's exceptional battery life. I've used this device actually as my personal phone for a couple of days. I got it in on Thursday in the office and used it Thursday and through the weekend on my personal, one of my personal lines, my Verizon line, and I've been incredibly impressed with the battery life on this bad boy. This is the first Android device that I literally have been unable to kill, and I'll tell you more about that a little bit later, both in part 1 and in part 2. But here's the DROID RAZR MAXX. This is available right now from Verizon Wireless for $299.99, so $300 with a new 2-year agreement. Now this thing, you'll notice, back from my original review of the RAZR, you'll notice it's a little bit thicker. It's 8.99 millimeters thin as opposed to the DROID RAZR's 7.1 millimeters thin. So just comparing these two briefly, you can see the size difference. You notice the hump on the original DROID RAZR. It's kind of gone on the DROID RAZR MAXX. It's been replaced, kind of has a few more lumps to it, a few more humps. My humps. But no, my goal was to try and get that song in this video at some point. Accomplished. Congratulations, Aaron. But you can see, you know, it's a little bit, you know, to me, it's a little bit easier to hold in the hand. It feels a little bit less anorexic, if you will. You know, this one's a little bit, I mean, it feels great in the hand, but it's a little bit thin, and, you know, it feels a little bit too wide as a result. This one kind of fits a little bit better just across the board. But you can see, otherwise, ports in the same place. You got your micro SIM card slot and your micro SD card slot over here, your HDMI port and your micro USB charging port up top with your 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, a power button and volume rocker, and it's packing the same specs, a 1.2 gigahertz dual core TI OMAP processor, Motorola's user interface atop Android 2.3, a 4.3-inch Super AMOLED Advanced QHD display, 540 by 960 pixels. It's got an 8-megapixel camera on the back with 1080p HD video recording, and then it's got front-facing camera as well, and I'm just pressing all kinds of buttons. But you can see some minor design differences. First of all, you'll notice the chrome, and I don't know how well you can see this in the camera, but the chrome is actually a little bit of a different color on the DROID RAZR MAXX. Still has the same Kevlar back, Gorilla Glass coating on the front, but the Motorola logo is white now as opposed to being black on the Motorola DROID RAZR. So you can see some minor design differences, but the real kicker here is the 3,300 milliamp hour battery. That's a huge battery, not just for an Android device, but for a cell phone in general. 3,300 milliamp hours is tablet territory, and Motorola claims that this thing can take 21.5 hours of talk time. They say that you can GPS all the way from LA to Nevada and back to LA, or you can watch 8 movies in a row, which is pretty impressive across the board. But you know, otherwise, very similar to the DROID RAZR, and just for that matter, any of the Motorola Droid devices on Verizon. You've got Motorola's standard user interface here, and out of the box, you get the typical applications: Amazon Kindle, Blockbuster, Google Books, which is obviously an Android thing, but GoToMeeting, IM, you got Let's Golf 2, Madden NFL 12. Now, while the Verizon stuff can't be uninstalled, these two games can be uninstalled, and that's a little feature of Motorola's user interface. You can press and hold the application directly, and it can be uninstalled. So it's got Moto Active and Moto Print, two nice features on this device as well. Netflix pre-installed, My Verizon Mobile. It has some more Verizon stuff like VCast Tones, Verizon Video, Video Surf, and then you can see some apps that I installed as well. It's got a VZ Navigator as well. Now the downside is none of the Verizon stuff can be uninstalled. It does stay on the device, and unfortunately, regardless of whether you use Verizon Video or not, you're stuck with that. But you've got a couple of Verizon apps, a couple of games, and some bloat, but not as bad as other devices we've seen in the past. You've got a shortcut up here to the market, and of course you can customize your folders as well and see some of the downloaded apps. You can come back over here and see recent applications, all apps, and then Verizon Wireless. And you can create your own group. So if I had a group like Aaron's applications that I use the most, or most frequently, I could download and throw those things into that individual folder, which is nice. 5 home screens on this bad boy, and it has the same carousel effect that you've seen on previous Motorola devices. So that's pretty cool. Let's jump into text messaging here. I'm going to pull this away since this was my personal device I've been using. I've got some text message threads that they probably wouldn't appreciate if I threw those on video. But here it is, Motorola's user interface with Motorola's custom keyboard as well. So you get the multi-touch keyboard and swipe out of the box. I've been experimenting with a keyboard in the Android market called Ice Cream Sandwich Keyboard Free. It's been pretty impressive, although for whatever reason I don't care for the way it runs on this individual device. So that's just a minor thing, but you can get that free in the Android market, but these are the two that come pre-installed out of the box. Now you can see Motorola's keyboard, much like on the DROID RAZR, it's gone to this black and dark gray color scheme, most likely because it's a Super AMOLED display. Darker colors equal longer battery life, and you can see that conversation area has gone from gray to dark black, just most likely to preserve battery. But we can type something here, and this used to be one of my favorite keyboards. It's still definitely up there, but some other ones have replaced it. I just don't feel like it's as responsive this time around as I've seen in the past, like on the Motorola DROID Bionic. But hey, test it for yourself and see what you think. What I will say is a 4.3-inch display makes it really nice to type on in landscape mode, pretty easy to type on portrait as well, and transition effects are nice and fast, as you can see here, and they have a nice transition to them as a part of Motorola's custom user interface. So we'll say the Quick Brown Fox, let's see, what is the Quick Brown Fox ready for? Is happy to go clubbing this weekend. How about that? The Quick Brown Fox is happy to go. My office is like 2 blocks from some of the big clubs, so that's what came to mind for whatever reason. The Quick Brown Fox is happy to go clubbing this weekend, and you can see the autocorrect is pretty good on Motorola's multi-touch keyboard, and like I said, you do have swipe out of the box as well. If you're coming over to a smartphone for the first time and you're used to a physical keyboard, or perhaps you've been using a BlackBerry with a physical keyboard and you're migrating over to this device, 4.3-inch display makes it super easy to type in landscape mode as well. But otherwise, design unchanged. You got your capacitive buttons down here at the bottom as well. Let's jump into browser and take a look. I'm going to pull this away so I can actually see what I'm doing. So there we go, phonedog.com, perfect. And we'll load that up. Verizon's 4G LTE connectivity here. Notification bar, very similar. One thing I do miss is having those shortcuts in the notification bar, those toggles to turn on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and GPS. You see those in Sense sometimes, you see those in TouchWiz 4.0 and more, and I've found those really useful over the years. But still, one thing I do like about Motorola is natively, when you do get a missed call or a text message or an email, and you don't really need to read the email, but you want to make sure the call and the message stay in the notifications bar, you can individually remove various things in there. So you can remove the email but keep the call and keep the text message intact as opposed to deleting it all, which is a nice little touch. And we've seen that more recently on Ice Cream Sandwich and some of the newer ones, but not so much on gingerbread builds, so that's nice to see that. Pinch to zoom, relatively responsive here, little to no lag that I've seen. It does a really decent job in the browsing department, and again, transitions are nice and zippy. Now, one thing I don't like about Motorola's user interface is when we come over here to Windows, you'll see it gives me an image here for PhoneDog, gives me the thumbnail. When I go to a new window, let's say Google's loading up, and we'll come back over here to Windows, and we'll see PhoneDog. It doesn't give me any sort of preview as to where I left off, but still, pinch to zoom is very responsive on this device, and I've been really impressed with the transition effects on both of these devices. So let's jump over actually to speed test, and I want to go ahead and do a speed test of Verizon's 4G LTE. I'm mixing it up a little bit here between the parts, but LTE enabled on this device. I've seen some pretty decent speeds. You can see some I've ran since the last reset here, and I've seen it kind of across the board, as low as 2.7 megabits per second, which Verizon claims 5 to 12. So these are pretty low, and these were all in 4G areas, all the way up to 27 megabits per second. So it's really across the board on this device, but I've really been pleased with the reception on this phone. Great radio on this. The speaker quality's been good, the earpiece quality's been decent, and the wireless radio has been pretty phenomenal as well. Right now it's pinging pretty well. You've got a ping of 56 milliseconds, download of just under 21 megabits per second, and an upload of about 6 megabits per second. So very impressive speeds. Then again, there's a Verizon cell site right across from my office, so that's something to keep in mind. In fact, it's so fast that if you hear those sirens outside right now, the police are coming because Verizon's 4G LTE is so smoking fast. That's the best joke I have for a Monday. But you know, it's interesting because they quote, like I said, 5 to 12. So to see these fluctuations in and out of 5 to 12 is pretty interesting given Verizon's track record with consistency. Let's also do quadrant standard on this and load that up and take a look. And I'll talk a little bit more about call quality. I took this thing to a Verizon dead spot in Northeast Charlotte. There's a known area near the university, UNC Charlotte. And while you know, the call was a little bit choppy, it did retain the call. I noticed some chop. I noticed there were points where I thought I was going to lose it, but overall the call quality has been pretty impressive. Motorola is known for their wireless radios. They do a pretty exceptional job with those, and this is no disappointment. So if you live in a Verizon fringe area, perhaps you get 1 bar of service at your house, or you can fluctuate between 0 and 1 bars of service. I think the DROID RAZR MAXX would be good for you, not only because of the big battery, because obviously when you drop to a certain level like that, the phone requires more battery pull, or you know, because of it pulling in signal from the cell site, you will pull the battery much faster. So if you're in an area with fringe and you wonder, why is my battery dying so fast when I live in the country versus when I'm in the city? Well, that's why, because it does require more battery. So with a big battery like this, combined with a great wireless radio, I think you'll be pretty happy across the board. So 2,440 in quadrant standard, 2,440. So again, pretty decent there, and excuse me, quadrant standard is pretty good. And then of course there are other benchmarks that you can use, like Antutu and some of the other ones in the Android market that have come up in the past 6 months. But overall, pretty decent. Take that with a grain of salt. I've been really pretty impressed with the performance. Little to no lag whatsoever. I've seen some quirks that I see on typical Motorola devices. I've noticed the gallery takes a little bit of time to render, particularly when I'm scrolling between pictures, you know, and they're kind of fuzzy for 1 or 2 seconds. Sometimes that fuzziness doesn't go away on this device, and I found that kind of interesting. Also, I stutter from time to time in the vibrations. I'll find, you know, when I'll press and hold something, like I'll go to the widgets, and you can see some of the Motorola widgets that come pre-installed. The vibration intensity is different one time versus the other. Like now it was kind of soft. Next time it may be pretty hard. It's just kind of odd to see that fluctuation. But you've got some nice Motorola widgets here. And like I've said in previous videos, we'll come over here. Let's actually go over to, let's do this. Let's do a widget here, and let's do, excuse me, date and time. And we'll do analog clock so you can see the widget here. And this is just an example of one of Motorola's customizable widgets, how I can customize it around, move it from different home screens, and I can really kind of customize it to the way I want it to look. So I can change it around if I'm in an area where I have a lot of widgets on one screen and I really want this to fit in. I have more of an ability to do that with Motorola's custom user interface.